house, and if any Indian tries to stop me, I'll blast him.
You know, the only thing more pathetic than Indians on TV is Indians watching Indians on TV.
Hello, everybody. I'm so excited for this episode. So excited. So excited. One, we're finally getting to the movie where my intro comes from. The scene where they're going across the ocean to get to America, to get to Virginia. They're trying to go to Jamestown. The line just from the intro. I had no idea. I've seen Pocahontas countless times in my life. I had no idea that's Christian Bale. When I looked at the cast and I wanted to look at the cast before I started my rewatch. I was like, that's freaking Christian Bale. How did I miss that? So the other reason why I'm excited, my first 4 episodes, so I got feedback from my wife. If this wasn't a problem to other people, I apologize. Please express whether it was or wasn't. Those of you that actually know who I am and have met me know I'm pretty goofy and kind of just, goofy is a good word. And I'm not very quiet and reserved, kind of like how I've come across. I think when I'm inquisitive and I'm thinking out loud, which has very much been the first couple of ones, I had to do a lot of research. I had to really think a lot. I think when I'm really concentrating, I have a very calm, just thinking voice. But for the most part, I'm goofy, and I haven't been able to be goofy because the only time I record my podcast is when everybody's asleep, when everybody's shut down for the day. My house is, to sleep. When my house is done, there's no more chores left. There's nothing to do except sit here and wait until, I get too tired to actually do nothing. So, my office, I share a wall with my 1-year-old son. So I can't be like yelling and going after it and getting after it like I normally do. So depending on how this episode is received and how it's done, I might move my office somewhere or move my podcast location to another room. We'll figure that one out as we mature with this podcast. But this one I'm really excited about because Pocahontas I've seen countless times. This came out in 1995. And I was 7 years old when this came out. I saw this movie in theaters with my family twice, I believe. So I'm from Tuba City, Arizona, and our little 2-screen cinema theater had this movie there, and I watched it twice. I know for sure. And I might have even gone to the nearby town, Flagstaff, an hour away, and watched it in the theater mall there. I could have done that too, but man, this movie came out amongst me and my cousins. Like, we watched this movie a lot, especially my cousins who are girls just watched this one a lot. It was a moment. And unfortunately, there's also some things that I think perpetuated some negative images, despite all of its positive things from my childhood and despite, all of the memories it gave me. Rewatching it was definitely like, yeesh. Some of it was real cringeworthy, but man, some of it, as bad as it was, it just, I couldn't help but sing along, and just reminisce and think about how awesome of a movie it is. And so I'm torn, that's what this review is. That's the whole point of this podcast, is not a native experience perspective for everybody, but just for me, Ian, Navajo guy, grew up Tuba City, born and raised there. That's my perspective, that I still enjoy Pocahontas to a certain extent. I think it's nice that this is the first time I've seen it in years. I mean, years. So it was nice to reminisce a little bit, go down memory lane. But I'm going to start with just going over the cast. So I think that's a good place to start with everything. And then once I hit the cast, then we will go over the actual plot. And then I think when we're done with the plot, just recap some things that stuck out to me. All right, let's go over the cast real quick. So the heavy hitters from the top. So there's Thomas from my intro, Christian Bale, playing a British guy. So there you go. He's got the accent nailed. It's good. Pocahontas, the famous, the legendary Irene Bedard, kills it as Pocahontas, Native woman, Cree. Billy Connolly is Ben. So he's kind of the brutish, long-haired, Gaston-looking character that's on the ship with everybody. And then Kocoum is James Apumutfall. He's a native guy. Mel Gibson, John Smith. Mel Gibson, the only person coming from London with an American accent. And he's Australian, so I really don't know what happened there, but that was an interesting choice. Linda Hunt was Grandmother Willow. John Casser, Miko. Judy Kuhn was the Pocahontas' singing voice. Russell Means was Chief Powatan in this movie. And then Governor Ratcliffe was played by David Ogden Sires. And then Nakoma is Michelle St. John. She's native. Kikata is Gordon Tutusis. So that was definitely everybody that was playing an actual Native American in person was cast by a Native American. Aside from Linda Hunt, obviously, she plays Grandmother Willow. But everybody who's actually Native, like this was groundbreaking for a Disney movie at the time because they actually hired Native American people to voice the roles that they were playing. Traditionally, the closest thing they had to an ethnic, non-white story was Aladdin, and in that one, you had Robin Williams just kind of, doing his thing. It's a children's movie. He's multifaceted. He's a multifaceted actor, so he could voice a lot of things. But he was doing a lot of, racial stereotypical accents, and there wasn't much diversity in that cast. So this was a big one. This was a big one. And I actually, in preparation for this, watched the making of Pocahontas. It's about a 27-minute video. It's on YouTube if you're interested, but they go over kind of just step by step with some of the lead animators, the composers, Russell Means and Irene Bedard, and the director, and they kind of just talk about how they got to the point where they got, along the way through the film. So that was the cast. I think overall, you could have, and so let me just take a break real quick. This is historically inaccurate, and I'm going to touch on that, but I'm not going to go into detail. I'm not a historian. I'm not someone who really is looking to pick that part, dissect that too much. Because honestly, I'm trying to look at it from the lens of a kid. The kid doesn't care if you're historically inaccurate. The kid cares about what's going to mold that kid's perception is the representation. Like, you can have liberties with the story, and Disney does that all the time. Every single one of their classic Disney stories is a crude version of it's really a spin in a way that is like a crude story, a crude folklore. Like every single Little Mermaid, Aladdin, like every single one of these is like a very real, raw, and mostly dark stories, and Disney somehow just makes a twist on it. So the fact that they took the story of John Smith and Pocahontas, and even though she was an 11-year-old in real life, they were just like, hey, we'll bump those numbers up. Not a big deal. We'll turn this into a positive story where this isn't a time when colonization's coming and they're starting to remove people from their land, and there's mass genocide starts to occur, and there's a lot of raping of women, and disease starts getting spread amongst the native people, and they start pushing them off the land. Like, that's something that Disney definitely misses the mark on, but there's no way in hell Disney's gonna tell that story, and frankly, that's not something I'm really interested in diving into, because Pocahontas has plenty of critiques and reviews on YouTube by people who just run historian podcasts, like historical accuracy shows, podcasts. Like, you can go on there and hear much more detail about, hey, how accurate is this from Jamestown now to where everything is in the film. and how accurate was it? Like, is that really what the boats' names were called? Did they change those? In this movie, there's 2 boats. I remember reading somewhere that like the real story is there's 3 boats, and then the different flags that are used, it's not historically accurate. So there's some people that completely go ham on that. And I'm not. I'm leaning into the native perspective, specifically on representation. So let's get into the plot. So it opens up, if you don't remember, it's a 1995 movie, so spoiler or not, I'm going into it, but this 1995 film opens up in 1607. So it starts in London, and they are at the Susan Constant is the ship, and they're about to sail over to the New World from the Virginia Company. So that's, hence the place they land in, Virginia, Jamestown, Virginia, Jamestown, because King James was in power at the time. Along the way, so what they kind of open up with the musical number, because they're like, can you believe it? John Smith is coming. John Smith is coming. The legendary John Smith. So he already has a reputation that precedes him by the crew. They're all up in arms. They go into a musical number because they're just ecstatic that John Smith, he has a reputation for taming savages. He has a reputation for being a man's man, basically. And they're like, hey, nothing's going to harm us because we got him on our side. So on their way over, on their journey to America, Thomas, Christian Bale, ends up, he's like a newbie. He's brand new to that profession. And it's, one of his first time sailing. And they steer right into rough waters. And their boat is about to be capsized multiple times. And he's trying to hold on to a cannon, basically. And he ends up going overboard. And John Smith, the badass who he is portrayed in the movie, he's just like, you know what? Everyone in the ship's like, Thomas is done. He's gone for, but John Smith ties a rope to himself. He's like, no man left behind. Dives into the water, even though they're in the middle of a freaking hurricane, it seems like, and he saves them. And so that kind of sets the tone for who John Smith is. That's why that's important. Is he's a man's man. He can do everything. He can do all. Not only is he a tamer of savages, but he's also gonna look out for you, and he's taking care of us when we get there. And then their whole, once things calm down a little bit, they talk about why they want to go. And so you get the initial motive out of the way of why these people are going. They're going to find gold, and they know about quote unquote Injuns that they're gonna have to fight. But because of what they saw John do just now, they're like, hey, he's got it. Don't matter. We got John Smith on our side. But that is their whole quest of going to America, is they're trying to find gold. And John Ratcliffe, that's his mission in life, is to get rich off of gold and become a figure in London. And then so fast forward to where they are right now in, current Jamestown. So Chief Powatan is, opens up musical number on the shore, pans across, and you see natives all over the place. You see them farming, you see them cultivating the land, cultivating fields. They're fishing, they're carrying baskets, they're harvesting, carrying baskets to the village, and then it goes into the village, and then you see it, boom, everybody's there, all of the tribe is there. And then we eventually learn that Pocahontas is to marry Kocoum. Eventually that comes out. And you get the hint that Pocahontas doesn't, she's not about it. She doesn't want that at all. She doesn't want to marry Kocoum, even though he's clearly the guy that's like, oh man, you want your daughter to marry Kocoum. Kocoum is the warrior. He is the provider. He is the alpha male to be, and probably going to be, the future chief at some day of this nation, of this community. So the fact that Kocoum wants to be married to Pocahontas, her dad is ecstatic. And Pocahontas, this is where we kind of get the glimpse that she is different than all of the Disney characters up to this point. She's different than the Disney princesses of old, when you have Ariel and Snow White, Cinderella, where she doesn't want a knight in shining armor. She doesn't need a man. She wants to be a free spirit. And then Just Around the River Bend starts, and if you've seen the movie, I really hope you're playing that song in your head, but Just Around the River Bend starts, and so she's she pushes off and really talks about, my favorite thing about rivers is you can't ever, it's always moving and you can't step in the same river twice. And then just around the river bend starts and she's like cutting and going through the rapids and in her, wooden hollowed out canoe, and she's just killing it down the freaking, down the river. And it really shows her adventurous side and shows how she can't be tamed and she's wild. And she's like, man, I don't want to marry Coco. Basically is what you're trying to get at. And then she goes and finds Grandmother Willow. So this is the first time we ever see Grandmother Willow. She talks to Kocoum about it. Talks to her about Kocoum, and then tells her about a dream she had. She's like, I don't know what's going on, but I had this dream of this spinning arrow, like of just like confusion about what the heck that's supposed to mean. And then Grandmother Willow's like, well, disregard that for now. Something's going on. Like, and then they eventually find the English. They see the sails come in, and then Governor Ratcliffe. You have a scene on him, and he's basically pontificating about why they're there, what he wants to achieve, so he can go back to London a hero and be the guy and be everything. So then they start their musical number. He starts passing out shovels, and he wants people panning for gold, and he thinks that the natives there are hiding the gold, and he thinks that if we see any of them, we need to kill them because there's no reasoning with these people. Even though they'd never met him, they only know like hearsay and accounts from it. Like Governor Radcliffe is just all about killing and getting his gold. He just wants his money. So then, while all that passing out of shovels and, panning for gold's going on, John, he goes rogue. He just does his own thing. He's like, I've never seen a land like this before, and gets up on mountaintops, and he wants to get the highest view that he could possibly can get. And while doing that, Pocahontas and him kind of cross paths. This is like the first scene in the movie where there's contact between the two. And so John Smith kind of goes off on his own. He's just like exploring. And Pocahontas is really just stalking him and trying to get a lay of like, who is this guy? What is this all about? She's intrigued. She's never seen a white person before. And then there's a moment where he dips and she loses him. And then eventually goes to a scene where John Smith has his musket out. He is ready. He doesn't know what he saw, but he knows it's probably a native, it's probably a savage, and he's going to take her out. Or that whatever that thing is. And then he, like, looking at her through the waterfall, jumps out of the waterfall, boom. And then they have this glorious shot of Pocahontas where she's, like, standing on a rock and just, hair blowing, looking just, fab, 100%, like, crazy. Just, and you can clearly tell that John Smith is like puts the gun down. He's like, well, I was going to shoot you if you weren't so darn attractive. And he puts his gun down and he just was like, okay, let's talk. I'm not here to hurt you. And then she bolts. And then they run off. She tries to get to her canoe again. And then he stops her. And all of a sudden they have a moment where eventually they just automatically can speak English, because of the colors of the wind. So that's a salient through point. I did say salient. It's a common through point in this plot where colors of the wind is indicated by like these leaves and magical kind of like looking hieroglyphics with this like pollen looking thing, and it's just like blowing through, and that's like the quote unquote Disney magic, the magic of the power of the of the native spirit, or the power to the community spirit. I'm not really sure what they do, but they use it loosely. It's just constantly in the plot. When they want something significant to happen and they just want it to be explained away, they put those leaves out there. And so after that point, they can start talking. They start talking English, and because the first word she says, it's in the language. It's in Algonquin, supposedly, and eventually, just immediately. Like that, she can speak English and fluent English, and there's no language barrier. They can immediately understand each other. And what's funny is from that point on, everybody can understand everybody. Like there is no language barrier anymore. Like Disney just explains that away with that, one magical whoosh. Because later on, there is no language barrier at any point with any other characters that have also never seen another person of another race, which I thought was interesting, because there's a scene later in the movie with Nakoma where they're in the cornfield and it's after Kocoum is shot. No. It's I don't remember his name, but one of them is shot, and Pocahontas comes back and she's just like, what's happening? What's happening? And then John Smith comes and she's like, oh, what's that? John Smith pops into the cornfield and like, I had to see you. And Nakoma's just like, what? I know what that means. What do you mean he had to see you? So she clearly it was the first time she ever saw a white person, and yet she understood English right away. And then the scenes at the very end, obviously, they can understand each other. They communicate with each other. So where was I? I digress. Sorry. So at that point, they're just kind of being playful. They do their own thing, and then they split up. They're just so enthralled with each other. They're like, how, John Smith talks about why they are there. Pocahontas kind of talks about her worldview. They exchange worldviews and their perspectives. And then eventually they're like, okay, clearly we're on two different wavelengths, but, I'm still intrigued. I still want to see you again. And then, Pocahontas lets him know, John Smith, like, hey, what do you mean you're here for gold? Like, there is no gold. I think that even though they're confused about how they feel about each other, like, I think it's the one thing that they can agree on is, okay, there is no gold. The natives said there's no gold here, so clearly there's no gold. Even though I've killed many savages before, not only did I not kill you, I'm going to believe every word you tell me. So John eventually goes back and tells that to Ratcliffe, and Ratcliffe just blows up. He's like, well, of course the natives are going to tell you that. He never even asks why how you were able to communicate with them. Or, when did you learn that dialect, or do they speak English here? It was just, well, of course they're going to lie to you because they want all the gold for themselves. And he just basically is building tension in his camp and letting them know, like, hey, this is real. We need to take their gold, and they want to keep it from us, and we need to go take it from them. And then so there's a few more interactions afterwards, but eventually John Smith and Pocahontas. There's a lot of the plot is mostly less words. It's more actions in this and more musicals. And really it ends up being that John Smith, Pocahontas, they have these exchanges where they see each other, they don't see each other. But they get to a point where they go back to Grandmother Willow, and Grandmother Willow basically is the grandmother that approves or disapproves. And so Pocahontas is unsure about how she feels about John Smith. She's sure, I should say, but she's not sure until she gets the blessing of Grandmother Willow, because it's clear that she leans on her wisdom and she wants her approval. So she takes John Smith over there. Grandmother Willow's like, he has a good heart, despite the fact that he killed all those savages before. He is a good person. So it's, yes, I give my approval. And then they have their big moment, their big kiss, and Kocoum sees them. He's out looking for Pocahontas because Nakoma, when John Smith was like, I had to see you, Pocahontas takes off and meets him in the woods, and then they go and meet at Grandmother Willow. And apparently Nakoma had sent Kocoum after Pocahontas to Taylor because she was worried. She's like, hey, this white dude just came out of the cornfields in the middle of the dark, and I'm worried about her. And Kocoum goes, and this is supposed to be his bride-to-be. He's supposed to be, the woman he's pining after, and she's kissing some unknown guy, and he freaks out. He flips out. And they have a tussle, and Kocoum's about to stab John Smith, and then Thomas finally is able to be functional. Up to this point, Thomas was a lame duck. He was not good at his job. He was very clumsy, and this is finally like the moment where he proves himself to John. They're like, hey, everything you've been coaching me up through this movie, it's going to pay off, and he shoots Kocoum. And then this is the event that gets people up in arms on both sides of the camp. Because John Smith is captured because they think that he's responsible for killing Kocoum. I mean, he is in a way, but he wasn't the one that pulled the trigger. And so they don't find Thomas. Thomas goes back to the village. To the fort to tell basically the white people, like, hey, John Smith got captured. We got to go get him. And then on the native side, they're like, hey, this is the guy that killed Kocoum. Well, not killed, but this is the guy that shot Kocoum. We need to have him pay for this. So they're going to kill him at sunup. And then we're going to call our brothers in arms. We're going to call our brothers from, across from down the coast, and they're going to come help us. So that's what happens. Another group of natives show up as reinforcements, and they're going to basically give John, the execution in the morning. They're going to give him the war club to the head. And so, Pocahontas wants to see John one more time before he goes, so she basically like connives her way into getting in to talk to John and was like, I want to talk to you, I want to see you, and or I want to see him, I want to see the person that hurt Cocoa. And she uses Nakoma to get in this, to get in that I don't know, they call her prison cell, but basically the hut. And I didn't like that because it's like, Nakoma, you just saw, I don't know, this was like the romanticized part of Disney that when I watched it, I'm just like, really, Nakoma, you had sent Kocoum to go after Pocahontas because you were worried about her well-being. You got Kocoum shot. It's like everyone's culpable at this point. And somehow Pocahontas is still like, I need to see John. I need to see him. I need to see it. But he can't die. And Tacoma at no point is like, do you understand? Nakoma at no point is like, do you not you just need to be like Pocahontas, like shake her. Like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, we have no idea what these people are about. The only interaction that I have with these people is somebody shooting one of our own. And all of a sudden, the other guy that I don't know anything about, that you're all enthralled about, you just want to go see willy-nilly, and he just like is killing one of our own. What if there's reinforcements? We should use him to get information. Like the regular movie plot thinker in my head is thinking that. But it's a Disney movie, so Nakoma is like, yes, friend, I will find a way to get you to see John. And John, of course, always Mr. Joe Cool. Pocahontas finally gets in there, and he's like, Pocahontas. And Pocahontas is like, I'm so sorry, John. For what? I've gotten out of worse bats and scrapes than this. Can't think of anything right now. And then Pocahontas starts crying, and it would have been better if it were me, or if we never met. None of this would have happened. And John, Pocahontas, look at me. I'd rather die tomorrow than live 100 years without knowing you. And Nakoma, Pocahontas, and he's like, can't leave you. And then John, as she's leaving, you never will. No matter what happens to me, I will always be with you forever. So just the lines, great timing, good job. It was a very engaging scene, to say the least. And I just kind of blazed through that to show, like, hey, they're really trying to set this up that, they're in love. It's not just, lust. Like, they love each other. They're at a point where they will gladly die for each other. And that's what happens the next day. There's this big Savages musical where the white people are talking about the Savages, and then eventually, the natives, and eventually the Savages song blends into two, trying to exemplify that everybody thinks the worst of the other person. And, the Savages starts being in unison. And then eventually you can see it was just coming from the white people at first, but eventually it's coming from the natives as well. They're calling the white people Savages, and they're, they have these like big smoke storms that come and collide, and it's supposed to be foreshadowing the battle to come. And at sunrise, Pocahontas goes to Grandmother Willow before sunrise, and she's like, Grandma, I don't know what the heck to do. Like, I'm pining over this white guy, and my family is about to go fight these other white guys, and we don't know anything about it. All I know is it's going to end in death, and it's going to be all my fault, because if I had never met John, none of this would have ever happened. And then Miko, the raccoon, pulls John's compass out, because Miko is a raccoon. He's always taking stuff from John because he gave him treats throughout the movie. And at some point, he just took his compass as well. Pulls his compass out, gives it to Pocahontas. Pocahontas opens up the compass. And then she's like, oh, there's my dream, the spinning arrow, there it is. And then the colors of the wind, leaves and pollen and hieroglyphs come in and just swirl around the compass and gets it to spin around. And Grandmother Willow's like, Pocahontas, go, you have to go, it's a sign, go save your man, basically. And the compass points to where John Smith is, so she hightails it out of there. She runs. And she gets there just as Chief Powhatan is about to take out John Smith, and lays her body over John, says like, no, you can't do this. This is wrong. And this is exactly what she says. She says, she throws her body over him and says, if you kill him, you have to kill me too. And Russell Means says, daughter, stand back. I won't. I love him, father. Look around you. This is where the path of hatred has brought us. And then there's just a lot of silence. And this is where Chief Powhatan, pans the area. He pans the land over him because they're standing on the cliff top. They have the high ground. They're looking over and they see nothing but muskets drawn and looking at him, and he pans over to where his people are, and he sees them all in war paint, and everybody's like ready to die that day. And Pocahontas says, "This is the path I choose, Father. What will yours be?" And then Russell Means, "Chief Powhatan, my daughter speaks with the wisdom beyond her years. We've all come here with anger on our hearts, but she comes with courage and understanding. From this day forward, if there is to be more killing, it will not start with me." Basically saying John Smith is free to go. And Governor Ratcliffe's not having it. He's just like, "Bro, I came here in a freaking suit of armor. I am ready to die today. I'm ready to shoot somebody. I want to shoot some natives." So he steals Thomas's musket and tries to shoot Chief Powhatan. John Smith jumps in front, and at that point, it's a mutiny on Governor Ratcliffe. They're like, "You're the bad guy. It's not these natives. You're the one that's wrong. You're the one that's poisoning our minds. It's your fault. Everything's wrong. These people don't have gold. It's like John was telling the truth. Like it's all lies." And so he gets captured by his own people, and they're like, "Okay, we're gonna go back." And John Smith is all wrapped up, and he's, so you get the impression that he's gonna make it, but it's gonna be a long road to recovery. Pocahontas tries to convince him. John Smith tries to convince her to stay. She says no, vice versa. Or, Pocahontas is like, "No, I can't go." And, he's like, "Well, I'll stay." She's like, "No, you need to go back to your people." And then the movie ends with Pocahontas standing on the cliffside in the colors of the rainbow, or colors of the wind once again, as they're going. John Smith is like signaling, or John Smith's laying there all taped up on the boat, is going back on the ocean, back across to London, and he feels the wind, he feels the love of Pocahontas. And this is one of the funny parts. He like gestures up, and they're like a couple miles away from each other, but he just doesn't like say hello or do anything. He does the Wingapo gesture that Pocahontas does at the beginning when they first meet each other. And so she does that same thing too. So that was a quick recap of the plot. I should have done it a little faster, I think, but and then the movie kind of just fades. It goes to a still image, a painted image, and then boom, that is the end. This movie, there's where do I start? There's a lot wrong with it, but there's a lot right. From my childhood, I should say. There's a lot right in the sense that in 1995, this was not a bad movie. The conceit of hindsight, we can always look back and say how terrible at you and wag our finger at Disney. And Disney does do a lot of messed up things. So this movie is interesting because I talked about the making of Pocahontas. When you watch that, at no point you are led to believe that this movie is okay, that this movie is groundbreaking, that this movie is something that should be held up on a pedestal as this is what Native representation looks like. And I don't know how accurate Native representation looks like. And I really don't know how to feel about that because in that, the making of, Irene Bedard is kind of narrating through the whole thing, and she's walking through modern day Jamestown and going through their exhibits and going through the process of the animators, really talking about how the film was made, how they chose the direction of the film. And it's so hard for me to say, like, shame on you, because Irene Bedard takes a lot of pride in this role. She is, despite what you say, Irene Bedard now is an ambassador. She has a lot of like prominent roles in the community. Like she uses Pocahontas, her role as Pocahontas, to have a global presence, and she tries to use it for good as best as possible to be a ambassador for women. Because this movie, say what you want about Pocahontas, it was the first Disney movie where the knight in shining armor did not have to save the princess. This was the first movie where the princess was the savior of the other guy. And so from that standpoint, this was a lot of like, hell yeah. Like there was a lot of that with this movie. And when you look at the Disney Princess Anthology, so I'll just start in 1937, you had Snow White. 1950, Cinderella. And and then 89 was Little Mermaid. So you have Ariel, and then Belle with Beauty and the Beast, and then in 92 you had Jasmine, you had Aladdin come out, then you had Pocahontas. Out of all those princesses before, none of them had this like free-spirited kind of, not even just free-spirited, but this idea that you like Pocahontas didn't need a protector, and that's something that Irene Bedard took a lot of pride in the plot and in the making of. That at no point in the movie did you ever think, oh no, what's going to happen to Pocahontas, until you got to the point where her dad might have potentially, hit her because she was defending John Smith. But that was a very like masculine thing to do up to that point, where the man was the one to proclaim his love, would lay his life on the line for the woman he loves. And so in that regard, like Irene Bedard loved this movie, and she, even to this day, I try to hear, because a lot of people ask her, like, do you renounce it? Do you look at it and say, oh yeah, it was historically inaccurate? And I think it's very much like a don't bite the hand that feeds thing. Irene Bedard has been playing Pocahontas for over 20 years. She has, like, there's video games that came out, there's tons of like sing-alongs, there's a ton of other Pocahontas related stuff that came out, like mini series, like TV shows. I know the Pocahontas 2, and then most recently in Wreck-It Ralph Breaks the Internet, they have that like princess scene. Irene Bedard was the actual voice in that. And so because of Wreck-It Ralph Breaks the Internet, she went and did like the Comic-Con circuit. And so she was like in exhibit halls and with interviews, and people would ask her, despite every, how does it feel looking back at a role that you represented a woman who is really an 11-year-old girl, and there's a lot of like potential wrong things associated with that. How can you be a part of a film that was so historically inaccurate? And she really leans into the first Disney princess that didn't need a Prince Charming to save her. She doesn't focus on the fact that it was historically inaccurate. She just tries to say it's difficult to please everyone. She's very like politician about that, and I think that's the only time I've ever seen her be like that. Other than that, has very different responses. So Irene Bedard I think she just doesn't want to be disconnected from being a Disney princess, and that's her prerogative. She's done a lot of great work because of this role, despite everything. So it's hard for me to like bash another native and say you need to renounce your role as Pocahontas. I mean, I'm not going to do that. And Russell Means too, like during that making of, Russell Means verbatim, this is the single most finest work done on American Indians by Hollywood ever. To me, that just shows how low the bar was in 1995. But it really was the first time, like Russell Means talks about, he's interviewed where he was shown like sketches of all of the huts and all of the homes that were in the beginning of the movie, where they pan over the land and you see all of the homes. And Russell Means was like, hey, that's actually not right. Like everyone, like all of the doors should be facing east. All the doorways to these homes should be facing east to the rising sun. So when you watch the movie, all of them are. And he's just like, awesome. They're listening to us. And there's just things like that in there that are very interesting. Like there's small wins like that Irene Bedard and Russell Means gave their feedback, and Disney was open to feedback where they allowed it to be. Obviously the plot, that's probably, you're not going to do anything about that, but they gave them the latitude to talk about some of the stuff. So like Russell Means suggested, he's like, the outfits aren't going to be the same for everybody. Like there's going to be the same style outfits for families. So like that was something he was proud of. He's like, you look across the land, you'll see that every family kind of has a different design, a different look on it. So you can tell who belongs to what family. And so things like that, because Disney listened to them and listened to their input, they felt like it was a win. And it's real hard to look back and say like they got the whole movie wrong, even though there's a bunch more they got wrong. They were open to feedback. I think it was a very like corporate way to be open to feedback, where they're just like, I'm gonna allow you to just polish the bumper, but the rest of the car design is mine. So you can be real proud about that bumper that you polished, but really it doesn't affect the way the car looks at all. And I really think that's what happened with this, because overall they sexualized an 11-year-old girl. No matter how you look at it, I know I wasn't going to get into the history part, but Disney did that on purpose. The lead, what are they? His official title is like supervisor of animation, or the lead animation of Pocahontas. Like, so he's responsible for just like, all right, you are responsible for animating Pocahontas, because this is way back in the day. They didn't have CGI. This was like, you had to draw these things like hundreds of, like thousands of times to animate it. And so Glenn Keane, he said, and I quote, "We're doing a mature love story here, and we got to draw her as such. She has got to be sexy." And when I heard that, I'm just like, geez, man, like, she's got to be sexy, you know? And it definitely comes across. She had a very Barbie-like figure to her, and they tried to make it seem like, oh, you know, we didn't draw her in any way that was stereotypical or not right. You know, we used Irene Bedard's figure to make her true to actually what, you know, true to a native person. And this film is interesting because all of that layered on top of each other, it makes you seem like this is okay. You know, like Irene Bedard, Russell Means, they played Chief Powatan in Pocahontas. They go on record saying this is an accurate depiction. They listen to us. You immediately learn English in the movie, not a problem. You know, don't worry about that. Even Russell Means as Chief Powatan, as John Smith is being sent off, he says, you know, "You are always welcome, my brother." And he, you know, leaves with that. You know, he knows how to talk English all of a sudden. And, you know, the guy that I was just about to club to death, sorry, my bad, you and my daughter in love. I really don't know how I feel about all of those inaccuracies, because as a kid, none of this registered. As a kid, none of this was relevant to me, because as a kid, I love this movie. So a quick Cocoam story to show you my love for this movie. As a kid, me and my brothers, I would, every single rainstorm in Tuba City, you get rain, it gets muddy because it's dirt everywhere, and you get a lot of mud for like a day and a half. And it's like muddy everywhere. And we had uneven ground in our backyard, so there would be like pools that would go up to your like shins, some places your knees. And so the Cocoam scene at the beginning of the movie, when they unveil Cocoam and they show him to be this great warrior, this strongest person in the community, and they put the bear paws on his chest, and the person has his closed fist and dips it in this red powder with both of his hands and lays the fist over his chest, and you see it turns into a perfect bear paw, of course, and you're just like, there, Cocoam is now the guy. He is the, you know, he's the guy. Me and my brothers, we try to do that so many times. I would say from like 7 all the way, you know, even randomly like into my teens, I would randomly just try it until I realized like, well, that's a very dumb thing to do, Ian. But as a 7-year-old, that was important to me. That was like 7 to 10, 11. I was just like, that's important to me. Cocoam is awesome. Cocoam's positive representation. Cocoam he's jacked. He's freaking cool. You know, he doesn't get the girl, but he's a great warrior, and I want a bear paw on my chest, just like him. And it's because of this movie, I thought I had the potential to talk to animals, you know, and there's that part of it, you know, where it frames even a native kid's mind that, you know, oh, I want a Miko and I want a Flit, you know, I want those relationships. So I don't know. I mean, we had sheep and cattle my whole life, and I always thought I could craft a relationship with one of them like that. You know, up until a certain age, you eventually leave that notion. But what is interesting to me, why I bring all of this up, why I bring everything up, is this movie ends on a positive note, and it ends in a way that the Disney message is love conquers all. It doesn't matter what someone's motivations are. They can be swayed. No matter the greed, no matter the obstacle, you can be swayed. You can be shown the right way once you have love in your heart, basically. Love conquers all is the message. And it's historically inaccurate in that regard. That's the one thing that I will lean on and say I did not like that at all, because it makes it seem like nobody's a savage, nobody's a bad person. We all came to an agreement, and hey, we're gonna go back to London. We were wrong. We're gonna go tell them there's no gold. We only made it inland maybe a mile, and we believe them. There's no gold. We're gonna go back and we're gonna go tell King James that like the natives are legit. They gave us corn. They gave us all this food. They repaired us. They mended us back to health, and they sent us on their way. And so we're never gonna come back. And that's so far from the truth. I mean, it's that part is crazy, because as a child, you see that and you think, oh, there's no bad blood, there's no poor relationships. And this movie, my wife brought up something that was a great point. This movie is showed in classrooms all over the place, because this is a part of the Disney saga. This is a Disney princess in the line of princesses. And this is viewed as positive representation of women in film and animation, because there is no damsel in distress in this. This is held up with Mulan as like, hey, women can be leads. Women can be, without a knight in shining armor. Women don't need a Prince Charming. So in classrooms all across America, and I'm sure in the world, this movie is showed to kids. And it's catchy. The songs, God, Colors of the Wind. I mean, that is a GOAT song, like that is just insane. I don't know. It's so hard. I mean, you can tell how torn I am. I mean, this show, me as a native kid having all those thoughts, my Cocoam story, wanting to talk to animals. I'm positive that other kids had that and framed that, and I'm curious how this frames non-native people's perceptions of native people. Because once again, going back to Wind River, this might be the closest thing you get to meeting a native in your entire life, and it's all stereotypical, and it's all mishmashed together. There's no language. There's no, outside of Wingapo, there's like no native language spoken in any of this. They didn't even have make the attempt to try to have native languages in this, despite the fact that they hired native people to play these native roles. You definitely have an opportunity to do some things right, and they did enough to pacify the natives, basically. To me, that's what they did. They did enough to get some natives to say, yes, this is an accurate film, and we're going to tout it as such so we can sell more tickets, so we can please people who want political correctness, but also, freaking sell this movie. And I don't know. It's just weird. Like, going back to the plot. Why does Grandmother Willow want Pocahontas to end up with John Smith? I mean, she wants it to happen so that way they can have this love conquers all message. But what I didn't understand is it reframes the colonist narrative that colonists, when the colonizers came, they came wanting land, they wanted resources, they wanted to flee, and they were looking to take over. And all of that can be overcome by love, and you need that. Because Grandmother Willow said, despite all of the savages that he claims to have killed, despite the fact that he is a tamer of civilizations, and he has a reputation for killing and taking over and being a conqueror of sorts, he still is a good man, and he still is worthy of your love. I really don't know what that does to the psyche of people. If somehow subliminally that ends up framing your mind as a kid, of how you should look at people, like keep giving people chances because that's not the real them. Because John Smith is arrogant throughout this entire movie, even up to his death. He never at once expresses humility. He's always like, oh, I've been in bigger tussles than this, or there's not any savages in this world that can come across that I haven't faced before. and he's just arrogant and braggadocious, and he does not care. But he is worthy of the most pure soul, supposedly, in the film. Not Cocoam, not somebody from your own tribe that will help moving forward. I did not like that at all. Watching that a second time, I think that I don't know. They would like the some of the problematic stuff, problematic representation, the smoke signal movies that they make in the film. What I mean by the smoke signal movies, after the ship arrives, the sails are there, and I think Cocoam and another person see John Smith as they're like throwing the shovels around, mining for gold, and they're looking around. They're digging. They see them, and then they go back and say like, "Hey, we saw some white people. What's going on?" And then they show them in their like smoke signals movies. You know, the elder comes and he does like basically magic and in their hut and fills the whole entire room with smoke and uses it to tell a story like it's a movie, and showing, you know, they're trying to mystify their connection to land and to smoke, and trying to show like, hey, this is how they used to be. This is how they used to communicate. So they were never, you know, savages. They were never uncivilized. Clearly they had things before we got there. God. The bar I use for this movie, I like this movie because it's connected to my childhood. If it's on, it's a toss-up. I had to be in a mood to watch it. I probably won't watch this again intentionally, but the music is on point. And, well, I should say Colors of the Wind is on point, and everything else is suspect. But the bar for me of how I really feel about this is, will I show this to my son? Absolutely not. As much as this like was a part of my childhood, I won't show this to my son because it's not accurate. I no joke, we used to like try to sit in like high places and let the wind hit my face, but maybe I can learn Navajo. You know, that's how they learned it in the movie. I can just have it come to me, you know? Like I just have to think about it. I just have to feel it harder. And I don't know. These the Disney movies, they give you this fantastical view that really skews your perception of reality, and in this case, erases colonialism from existence. And it's still present today. The people that enjoy Pocahontas, because it's a Disney movie. I'm torn. I'm Native. I'm Navajo, and I am torn. I will say that I don't like this movie. I will say that I'm not going to intentionally watch it again. But Colors of the Wind is still Colors of the Wind, you know? But there are other people that still love this because she is a Disney princess. My wife showed me a couple of pages online where there's Instagram fan pages dedicated to just Pocahontas. I encourage you to do that, to go look. People still do fan art. People do clip art. People are still, you know, they'll redraw Pocahontas all the time. And it's like, that's when you see the impact of Pocahontas. When you see people add random feathers to her hair, they'll add beads to her outfit. They'll add like a dream catcher to the background because they think it looks cool. Like that's when you really see the impact. When I get out of my own head and I look at how other non-natives viewed it, I'm like, okay, that's where it's problematic. Because we don't, you know, dream catchers and feathers and random arrows splayed in the background and a watermark. Like they want that to be a part of our culture. They mystified us to a way where we're magic. We're not real. Like look at these magical people off in the woods that don't need shoes. Like nobody wears shoes in this movie. They just, except for the white people, you know, nobody has shoes except for there's like Chief Powatan has shoes, but nobody else does. And, you know, Pocahontas just runs throughout the forest with no shoes, talking about how there's pine trees and pine needles everywhere. And, you know, it's like there's this savage aspect that they push, but they're like, you're not savage. You're something to be revered. Like you're gone in a way. I don't really like that. And one thing that I encourage everybody to do is go to reviews of this movie, because there you'll see non-natives. Like natives won't leave reviews of maybe they will. But just from a population odds standpoint, go look at reviews. Most likely you're gonna have non-natives reviewing this. Like IMDb, I'm looking at one right now. Quote, recently, I started watching this again with my 4-year-old son and fell in love with it all over again. The music is outstanding. I especially love the colors of the wind, and the entire movie is a visual treat. I know many have complained that this movie is a European version of an event and demeaning to American Indians, but from what I've read, Russell Means, voice of Powhatan, was happy with the final product and its portrayal of Native Americans. Whether or not it's historically accurate, it is great entertainment, and I believe the overall message of peace and acceptance between people is timeless good advice. All in all, great addition to the Disney catalog of movies. So there you go. And when I go to the, let's see more reviews, there's 267 reviews on Pocahontas. Like, I'm on the first page. Everything is like 7 above, like 7 over 10. There's like peppered in randomly like 3 out of 10. People will say, this is bizarre. How the hell do you like this movie? It's so inaccurate. But for the most part, everybody has a get over it like feeling to this movie. And I think that is telling of where people feel of like where our native like history is and native suffering. Like they don't want to hear it. Like you're yes, it's sad. Yes, colonization is sad. Yes, it's not right to tell a story that's historically inaccurate, and I get it. But Pocahontas is a great movie. You need to understand that. All of that aside, they didn't mean to hurt you. They didn't mean to make a bad film. Like Pocahontas is still a pretty movie, and it should be watched. And to this day, there are still teachers that show Pocahontas in classrooms every single year. There are still Pocahontas Halloween outfits that come out. When you go to cosplay performances, people will dress up as Pocahontas, and they will just come up with the most like they won't just take Pocahontas's outfit. They'll add stuff like the Pocahontas fan art. They'll take random feathers, they'll put it in their hair, they'll put random face paint on just because they think it fits the part. They'll craft their own image of what it means to be native. I never went anywhere close to that. The closest I ever did was try to do the Cocoa bear paw thing and think that I could learn Navajo from the wind, and even then that was like a small part of my life. But I just, it makes me think too, like as a native kid, it made me do that. And sometimes I don't realize that happened to other kids too. Native and non-native alike, that saw this at a certain age when you were very impressionable, and yeah, it was just this movie. This movie was something else. So one funny story. Savages. The song Savages. I can't remember. I was like really going deep in one of those YouTube comment rabbit holes. And somebody had the audacity to, let me find the lyrics real quick. I have it in front of me. Don't tell me I got rid of it. Darn it. Well, I guess we'll have to wait some other time. So I can at least tell the story. The line from the movie is in the Savages song. And Powhatan says, "This is what we feared. The paleface is a demon. The only thing they feel at all is greed." And then one of the other natives says, "Beneath that milky hide, there's emptiness inside." And the warriors, "I wonder if they even bleed." Everyone, "They're savages, barely even human. And then killers at the core, they're different from us, which means they can't be trusted. We must sound the drums of war." And they go. And somebody in the comments, there was a thread of people saying like how problematic calling people savages is. And there's a funny comment about somebody who thought they were saying cabbages their entire childhood. But in Savages, they were talking about how problematic it is to refer to people as less than human, even if it is in human form. And somebody, in reference to that, beneath that milky hide, there's emptiness inside. You could tell it was a non-native person. I think it was a white person. Because it was like, hey, man, it's a two-way street. You know, that phrase is just as hurtful as you guys, us calling, or as the white people in the movie calling people savages, you know, and I was dying laughing when I read that freaking thing. It's hurtful when he says beneath that milky hide there's emptiness inside. If that's the most hurtful thing, if that overrides all of the savages and barely even human, and you know, we need to take their land from them because they're uncivilized, they don't know any better, they don't know what to do with their land, so we have to take it from them. They're not going to use it right anyway. It's interesting to see how people just still try to justify this movie. I justify parts of it because it was a part of my childhood, but you know, overall, it's not good. It's not good. It was a maturation point, and I'll give it that for the time it was in the Disney Princess saga, and it was a maturation point in that Disney listened to the feedback given by the native actors, and the native actors felt like empowered and they felt like they listened. But you can't put that on just the native actors' shoulders. That is grossly unfair to make them be the representative of natives all across the land and say, Russell Means, Irene Bedard, all the natives on the cast, they all said it's good, so therefore it is good. They speak for everybody. I think that's just very corporate. That's a very corporate thing to do, to say okay, this small circle of people that trust us, they said we're good, so we're good. All right, write the check. We're good. Yeah, I really think that's the big takeaway. Honestly, is I'm not going to show this to my son. If he sees it, he sees it. There's better representation in Disney movies and animated movies now. I would definitely try to steer him away from Disney movies if possible. But there's other things. There's other cartoons. There's other animated shows that I really want him to watch that aren't this. And if he comes across it, maybe when he's an adult someday, we'll have a good laugh. But as of right now, nah, man. Nah. All right, well, that was Pocahontas. If you made it this far, I appreciate it. And I will say that there's another film podcast by a native guy. There's another native film podcast out there. It's called Skoden Cinema. Great freaking name. I was pissed when I saw it. He started his podcast around the same time as me. But when I saw Skoden Cinema, I was like, dang it, that is a great freaking name. When you look at his thumbnail art on his podcast, he's got some great movies on there like Thunderheart, Ghost Dance, and War Pony, Billy Jack. So I think those are the kind of movies that he's doing. I've talked to him a little bit, and he wants to do deep cut movies of natives. So he's done Legend of the Lone Ranger 1981, Jingle Dress 2014. He's got Ghost Dance coming up next month. He does a monthly podcast. It's seasonal, so he tries to vary it month by month to match the season that he's in for that month. And next month he's doing One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest for that native representation. So he's a pretty cool dude. Skoden Cinema. We'll check that one out. All right, everybody. Well, thank you all for listening to another episode of Native Film Talk. Talk to you later.